what's your name? Roy?
Oh, Kepel, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So,
Yes, today we will be discussing radicalized youth. And what I believe is that you see what I'm talking about with radicalized youth. I am meaning radicalized youth that are turning towards Islam and going to fight for ISIS in Syria and Iraq. That's the pool I'm talking about. I believe that they are radicalized because they're young and they're rebels, and they're trying to be rebellious not only towards their parents and this generation that came before them, but also the society they live within. You have France, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, where you have the most cases of young people traveling to Iraq and Syria to fight for ISIS. And I believe that what you find in those contexts are antipathy towards the context or the nation states they're living in, and Europe as general.
I'm gonna stop you right there. What do you mean by saying radicalized youth? I mean, who are you talking about? What group do you refer to? I mean, radicalized youth. It's pretty general, no?
I believe that I know for a fact that I've read some of your texts that you believe that it is Muslims, basically what you're talking about, and they're radical because they're Muslims. I believe it's the other way around. I believe they are radical because they're young and they found an outlet in Islam, but they could also find an outlet in other ways. Like, for instance, you've seen it back to the 60s with people being rebellious towards society and the culture within their living, and I feel that these young I'm talking about that's turning towards Islam, and that is there, as I mentioned before, it's not the radicalization of Islam, but it's the Islamification of radicalism.
What I think the problem here is you seem to neglect the factor that Islam has. For you it is more encompassing of a whole generation, whereas for me it's not just Islam, it's also the way I term it in my writings, it's the children of post-colonial immigrants, and it is that they don't have a feeling of being understood, they're marginalized by the societies that they're in, and feel neglected, feel marginalized, and for me, their violence or their actions stem from that. And if you neglect and you say it's just a whole generation, I really think you neglect a vital part right there. I will give you an example. This doesn't have to do with people, for example, going to fight with Islamist groups or going to fight with ISIS. But if you look at Germany, you have a generation now growing up that they were born in Germany, they've been raised there, they went to school, and mostly their grandparents came to Germany, and the framework that they came under is they were called guest workers. So this implies that you're not really part of the society as such. You are guests, and then you're expected to leave. And now this young generation feels like they're still not being a part of the German society. So now Germans are wondering, why are these, or some of these young Turkish Germans, for example, voting for like conservative parties in Turkey? Why are they supporting Erdogan so much? And a lot of Turks would tell you probably that this is because they don't feel like they're understood. They don't feel like they belong within German society, because German society is not trying to see them as equal parts as Germans, but they're always the German Turks and the people who came with the guest workers. or who stem from this generation of guest workers. And they, in order to feel strong and to feel like there is meaning, they would turn into, you know, this identity of I am a Turk as well, and I vote for Erdogan because he's strong, and then Germany blames them and says, oh well, if you think that, you should leave Germany because we don't respect your opinion here, and that just pushes them further and further. So it is this marginalization that, again, you could find other cases where people would go and fight. Actually, this is not about that, but I really do see a problem with excluding certain groups of people within European countries and then seeing their reaction from there. So I don't think you can just say it is a whole generation as such. You're neglecting part of it.
But I still feel like you're touching on something with the generational gap, because what we're seeing is not these kids, young people's parents being radicalized as much and going to fight for ISIS and Daesh, or Daesh in Iraq and Syria. It's these young people. So you need to take in the factor that they're young. And being young is being rebellious against both their parents and against the society they're in. And why is it they're seeking away from not only their parents and the European countries they were born and raised in, but seeking towards an entire different region where they've not been socialized. They often don't have a perception really of what's going on. They don't really care about the issues in the Middle East. What they care about is what jihad represents, which is this kind of if they focus on jihad, they can I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What I'm trying to say is that what they are getting out of, or they're gaining from being radicalized like this, it's also a motivation towards death, basically, which they're sort of nihilist in that way, because they are not going to the Middle East to create a new life or a new caliphate. They're basically going there to destroy the nations there, nation states there. And if they die in the process, well, great. I mean, they don't care about life. They care about death, is my point.
So what, I mean, if you're saying then that religion is just a vehicle for turning to violence, I mean, it's just one of the justifications that you could have. But why, I mean, are you completely neglecting then that is just religion, is Islam in this case just a coincidence?
Yeah. It could have been anything else. I believe that Islam is also, it's interpreted differently. You have different views. You have more moderate voices, you have Salafism, and I don't feel like jihadism is Salafism. You need to distinguish these two. That's another discussion we go into later. But it could also been, you also see a lot of young people in these European countries starting out in gangs and doing petty crimes, and through that getting in touch with people in the prison system that are Muslims and radicalized them like that because they're vulnerable and because they don't care about their lives.
Yeah. You
need to take into the aspect that they're young and rebellious and nihilistic, and that's not because they're Muslims or they see Islam as being that. It is because they're young and they're what they're turning towards, what they're interested in, how they gain knowledge is through media, social media, videos on YouTube, popular movies. That is how they're reflecting themselves, and that's also how they're getting radicalized.
But wouldn't you say that if young people, and in my case, I really think it's marginalized young people. It's children or grandchildren of immigrants that came that don't feel understood. Don't you think they're more vulnerable to turn to these groups that you just mentioned because they don't feel like they have a place to belong within the mainstream society?
part of it, yes, but why they're turning towards it, you have to look at the philosophy in it and their psychological factors, and they're having this existential crisis basically, or feeling that life has no meaning, only death has. And that is a way to do it. I think Daesh and ISIS has created this opportunity for them to kind of let out their feelings or their views of life. You know what I mean?
Well,
but you don't agree with me. You feel like I am generalizing the entire youth?
Mr. Roy, I do.
Well, let's agree to disagree.
Let's agree to disagree.
Because I think we are on a time limit.
Correct, yes.
Alright.
Well, maybe someday in the future we can carry on our conversation.